see how long it takes us to get there. It was easier to get there. TikTok, TikTok. This is hardwired, right, Mr. Chairman? This is hardwired. This is not like, this is not over the air.
This ran a lot faster before the House passed CISPA.
So, Bob Edelman's bio should be posted here. I don't know why sometimes it asks me about that, sometimes it doesn't. I don't understand Bill Gates' nonsense. Okay, so Bob Edelman, graduate of Cornell University, 2 degrees, MBA, concentration in economics and finance. Bob moved to Colorado Springs with his family in 1964. He started selling life insurance in a new town with no natural market. I'm not sure what he meant by that. And within a few years, qualified for the $1 Million Roundtable several times. This was back when a dollar was still worth 50 cents. His career path took him from insurance into estate planning, then into investment and tax planning. In 1984, he was nominated as one of the top 10 investment salesmen for a major Wall Street investment firm. Following the stock market crash in October of '87, Bob started his own investment management company, which grew to over $15 million under management in less than 10 years. After selling his investment company to his son, Bob started some other companies. He recently sold his last company and now writes for conservative journals, magazines, and newspapers, including the New American. He's a life member of the John Birch Society, the National Rifle Association. He and his wife, Mary, live in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and they're active. First Presbyterian Church, but which one of the First Presbyterian churches? The conservative one. Okay? Let's give a welcome to Bob Edelman.
I feel like I'm among friends, having done this before.
Oh,
it's most
start recording.
Oh, is that right? Thank you. Thanks for reminding me. That's. We wind it up, spool it up again. I feel like I'm among friends. I still do. I'm encouraged and a little flattered that so many of you showed up having heard me before. I mean, considering all the other places you could be tonight. So I'm grateful. What we're going to do tonight is simply do a skim. It's an impossible thing that we've set ourselves to do, and that is to cover 500 years worth of history from 1436 through last night, and do it inside of, what, 8 o'clock? He's saying yes. There's only 2 ways to do that, and that is to fly low or speak fast. And so we're going to do both. In a remarkable coalescence of time and opportunity, Michael Hart was driving home from watching the fireworks on Independence Day, July 4th, 1971. And on his way home, he stopped off at a convenience store to buy a few things, and he was given a free copy of the Declaration of Independence on a piece of parchment. And he thought, I'm going to put that out to my friends on DARPANet. Now, that's the precursor to the internet. He had access to one of the mainframes. And so he went home and was about to type the entire document in, and a friend of his said, you probably don't want to do that. The system is so fragile and so tender and so new, you'll probably crash it. Why don't you simply indicate it as an email, and they can download the file from their end? Well, that was the first experience he had with the ability to send out information using this remarkable thing called the internet. From that came his investment in and development of something called the Gutenberg Project. Now, you can go to a search engine right now and discover that the Gutenberg Project is the largest private, nonprofit e-book site with 38,000 e-books available. When he died in September, last September, his obituary in the New York Times gave a very brief idea of what he saw. But he basically said the internet can give everybody everything. I thought that was a remarkable way of saying it. The New York Times also said something which struck me, and it's relevant to us who are involved in the freedom fight. And he said the internet is capable of, quote, overturning all established power structures. Now, I don't know what you think about that, but that caught me. Anything that has the ability to overturn existing power structures is something that I want to know more about. Now, that was Michael Hart. Now, that date is a useful date. The way we're going to do this tonight is we're going to climb the face of Half Dome in Yosemite. How many of you are rock climbers? Okay, we have one. A piton is simply a nail that we drive into the face, and we use it as support to build to the next step. And what we're going to be doing is using these pitons, only we're going to be calling them by various dates. And so as we go from the development of the Gutenberg press in 1436, we're going to be sticking in these pitons going up the side of Half Dome in Yosemite. And with any luck at all, we'll get to the top by 8 o'clock with no falls. The impact of the movable type press, is simply almost incomprehensible. I have studied and read and written about it, and I'm just scratching the surface. But it was a driving force behind the Renaissance, the Reformation, the scientific revolution, the free market economy, the concept of private property, national and individual sovereignty. Now, how about that for starts? And I can prove it, and we're going to do that right now. The very first thing that Johannes Gutenberg did was, as a marketer, said, what can I print that people would want to buy? And he went to the Holy Bible. At that point, a Bible cost a scribe a year of his life. And so they were very rare and mostly held by officials in the Catholic Church. Over time, the officials in the Catholic Church took advantage of that and said, we're going to interpret the Bible the way we see it, not as the way it is. Now, we'll come to that in a moment. And I don't want to be too hard on the Catholic Church. Do we have Catholics here? Don't be ashamed to raise your hand. Same guy. Okay. The very first thing he did was run 180 Bibles, a print run of 180. Now, here's the key point, and this is the point that overlays all of our conversation. For the very first time, people had access to the original source. I think that's critical. The moment that we get the original source, we can check against what we're being told. We can check the footnotes and the source material and the link, if you will, on the internet and say, is this true? Is this can be tracked? Is it validated or not? And so the very first thing happened is that people started to read the Bible. Two things happened. One is it improved their reading and their understanding, and secondly, how they'd been fooled a little. The next run consisted of, over the next 6 years, 1,000 Bibles. By the year 1500, another piton in the walk up the face, there were 1,000 printing presses all over Europe, and they had printed at that point 8 million books, and by the year 1600, presses had been cranking out some 200 million books. So it was a virtual explosion over that period of time. One of the exposures occurred, and you can go to anytime I say go to the internet, I'm not going to use the word Google. That's an aside, and I'm just going to go down that road. I do not use Google because they keep a track of the IP address. I use something called Start Page, which does not track IP. So when I say search, I'm not going to say Google. Go to your search engine of choice. But type in Renaissance popes, and you'll discover, as I had, that over the 60-year period from 1470 to 1530, there were 6 popes that had such ghastly behavior and so offended the laity that they became aware of that bad behavior and created the pressure that led to the Protestant Reformation. This is not an easy thing to condense. It's like watching a bowl of soup or a cup of soup or a pot of soup boil. it takes a long, long time for this stuff to come to the surface. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the behavior of the Renaissance popes. I have been to some wild parties in my younger single days. I cannot simply even begin to describe the kind of parties that these folks had. Several of the popes never held Mass. They had parties that were simply beyond describing. I'm not inviting you to go search. You'll be offended as I was at their behavior. The point is that it was now public behavior. Barbara Tushman wrote a book called March of Follies. The book is 4 chapters, huge chapters. Chapter 3 was The Renaissance Popes Provoke the Protestant Secession. Now, I'm going to condense briefly, and I'm going to use some quotes because people say things that I want said better than I can say it. But she said, printing and growing literacy nourished dissent, especially through direct acquaintance with the Bible in the vernacular. 400 such editions appeared in the first 60 years of the printing press. And everyone who could read could find in the lore of the Gospels something missing from the hierarchy of his own day, gowned in their purple and red. In other words, what was being taught by the church often was different from what was being taught in Scripture. And along came an Augustinian monk. He was attending the university at Wittenberg at the suggestion of his father. And he began to discover that the difference between what the Bible taught and what the church was teaching became so offensive to him that he decided to write a letter to his, I want to call it boss, I don't know if you Pope in charge or whatever, the next level up, wanting the answers to some questions. He said, why are we selling indulgences? We have salesmen for the church going around selling indulgences. Why do we ever think that that would be scriptural? Only the Lord himself can forgive sin. What you're suggesting is that the rich folk can buy forgiveness and then enjoy sin? Now, that's a very brief condensation of his 95 theses, but of course this is Martin Luther about whom I'm referring. His friends, and it was just a private letter. Now, there was some question about whether it was actually nailed to the All Saints Church front door. That makes a great myth, and it hasn't been proven. It doesn't make any difference. What happened is, what really made a difference is that his friends got a hold of this letter, and they took it and printed it. And within 2 weeks, his letter was all across Germany. The cat was out of the bag. Within 2 months, it was across all of Europe, and 12 months it had reached Italy, France, and England. And that was one of the sparks to the Reformation. It was aided and encouraged, of course, by some discoveries, and now we are talking about pitons that are kind of supporting us as we're going up the wall. In 1492, Columbus, of course, discovered, and we built the trade west. Vasco da Gama built the trade to the east, and we had ability then to reach other civilizations with this information. So it wasn't the press all by itself, but it was the driving force. Of course, conflict arose. First of all, it was just theoretical conflict or mental conflict or philosophical conflict between the Protestants and the Catholics. But eventually, the protests and the conflicts became, how do I say this nicely, a little more active. And then eventually they became fights, and then battles, and then wars. And now I'm referring to, and there's a start and happily an ending date, of the 30 Years' War starting in 1618, which simply were Protestants and Catholics fighting over theology. Now, there's a lot more to it than that, but that was the essence of it. And by the time the 30 years was up, 300,000 people had died. And the fighting was so ferocious that they had effectively denuded much of Germany's forests. It was an extraordinary, ghastly event. But it was resolved in 1648 by the signing of a number of treaties, which is now referred to as the Treaty of Westphalia. That was a remarkable treaty. It guaranteed for the first time the sovereignty of individual states, the right of political self-determination, equality between states, and non-interference by one state into the personal inside affairs of another state. Now that is remarkable. How many of you until this moment had ever heard of the Treaty of Westphalia. Good. I think it's amazing that we don't know more about it. You talk about a turning point. Well, following that, of course, was the development, and we're going to see a direct impact on the Republic of the United States. In 1536, another peg that we have to stick in the wall is the publishing, thank you, Gutenberg, of the Institutes of the Christian Religion by John Calvin. That occurred just 100 years after the development of the press, which I find ironic, but I also find it easy to remember. 1536, the Institutes of the Christian Religion, using the same channels and the same ability to reproduce in great quantity. That theology moved into England and up into Scotland, and it had such an impact that by 1560, Scotland had officially denied and declared the Pope illegal and had established as policy the Protestant confession of faith, setting in motion the Scottish Reformation. When Scots moved to America, they took with them, of course, Calvin's theology. And so we can see how the ripple effect takes. When they emigrated to America, they took with them, guess what? Not only their theology, but their organization. They called them presbyteries, but they were the foundation stone of how the Republic of the United States was originally created. Representative, call it representative democracy, representative republic. The presbyteries were the founding structure of all that. Let me give you a quote from a well-known professor of history, E.W. Smith. He raised an interesting rhetorical question. He said, where learned they, the founders of the Republic, where learned they those immortal principles of the rights of man, of human liberty, equality, and self-government, on which they based their republic, and which form today the distinctive glory of our American civilization? Where learned they? In the school of Calvin they learned them. There the modern world learned them. Now some people say, whoa, I didn't know that. There are some people who have answered the question, who was the founder of the United States, the Republic? And some people say, well, it was John Calvin. That's a bit of a stretch. But let me give you some proof. Let you kind of cogitate and meditate and think about this for a minute. What I'm going to do is read a quote for you, and then have you tell me who wrote it. Now be very careful. It is not who you think wrote it. And then I'll fill in all the blanks and make the point. We do hereby dissolve the political bands which have connected us with the mother country, and hereby absolve ourselves from all allegiance to the British Crown. We hereby declare ourselves a free and independent people, are and of right ought to be a sovereign and self-governing association, under control of no power other than that of our God and the general government of Congress, to the maintenance of which we solemnly pledge to each other our mutual cooperation and our lives, our fortunes, and our most sacred honor. Now, who do you suppose said that? Maybe more to the point, when was it said? The history on it is fascinating. Right after the British attacks in Lexington and Concord, some people just outside of what is now Charlotte, North Carolina, living in Mecklenburg County, got together. They got mad. And they got together and said, we are seceding from the crown. And they wrote that.
May 20th.
The Citizens of Mecklenburg County. The author was Ephraim Brevard, the ruling elder of the Presbyterian Church. And when was it done? It's called the Mecklenburg Declaration. Again, go to your search engine of choice, and you'll get the details on that. It was in May of 1775. And so I raised the interesting question to you, where did Thomas Jefferson get his language? And who preceded Thomas? I mean, isn't this interesting, what you find when you read? Well, in January of 1776, a pamphlet was printed originally anonymously. It was 48 pages long, January of 76, the historian Gordon Wood said it was the most incendiary and popular pamphlet of the entire Revolutionary era. Now that's easy. What's that?
Common Sense.
Common Sense, Thomas Paine. It was interesting that he published it anonymously. In 3 months, they had 120,000 copies published, 500,000 copies were published in the first year, and 25 editions in the first year alone. The impact of the Common Sense of Thomas Paine, according to George Trevelyan, author of History of the American Revolution, said, "It would be difficult to name any human composition which has had an effect at once so instant, so extended, and so lasting. It was pirated, parodied, and imitated, and translated into the language of every country where the new republic had well-wishers. It worked nothing short of miracles and turned Tories into Whigs." Because of the press and the ability to replicate and duplicate and multiply and spread. I'm going to give you another quote, play another game with you. In April of 1900, a well-known humorist, author, writer, poet, was asked to give a memorial to Mr. Gutenberg. And I'm going to read you what he wrote, and then you tell me who wrote it. This is easy, easier than the other ones. He said, "Your request that I also should contribute my mite to the semi-millennial celebration in honor of Gutenberg gives me great pleasure, and I feel highly honored that you have selected me for the task. All the world acknowledges that the invention of Gutenberg is the greatest event that secular history has recorded. Gutenberg's achievement created a new and wonderful earth, but at the same time also a new hell. During the past 500 years, Gutenberg's invention has supplied both earth and hell with new occurrences, new wonders, and new phases. It found truth astir in earth and gave it wings. But untruth also was abroad, and it was supplied with a double pair of wings. Science was found lurking in corners, much prosecuted. Gutenberg's invention gave it freedom on land and sea and brought it within reach of every mortal. Arts and industries, badly handicapped, received new life. Religion, which during the Middle Ages assumed tyrannical sway, was transformed into a friend and benefactor of mankind. It became the founder and protector of human liberty. What the world is today, good and bad, it owes to Gutenberg. Everything can be traced to this single source, but we are bound to bring him homage, for the bad that his colossal invention has brought about is overshadowed 1,000 times by the good with which mankind has been favored. Yours very truly, Mark Twain. And so, to wrap the first half of the 500-year leap that we've done here, from the development of movable type in 1436 to the printing of the Gutenberg Bible in 1455 to the explosive duplication of Luther's 95 Theses beginning in 1518, we're walking up the side of the Half Dome, to the 30 Years' War from 1618 to 1648 to the Treaty of Westphalia, which ended the 30 Years' War in 1648, thus establishing the sovereignty of nations, to the Scottish immigration to America in the 1600s, carrying with it John Calvin's theology, to the Mecklenburg Declaration in 1775, to the patriotic bursting forth of common sense in January of 1776, to the Declaration of Independence in 1776, one can trace the amazing impact the Gutenberg Press had on political, social, religious institution in just over 300 years. You ain't seen nothing yet. That's a good time to kind of take a deep breath. The internet really became commercial in an event that happened in 1995. Now notice how we just leaped another 200 years. But in 1995, a small internet commercial company made its first sale over the internet. 1995. What was the name of that company?
Netscape.
Echo Bay, better known as 1995. Another piton in the wall as we're going up the hill. 1995. It took just 3 years. You know, it took us 500 years to go from 1436 to where now it took 3 years for the impact of the internet to begin to be felt. It was Saturday morning, January 17th, 1998. It was very early in the morning. And this young man got himself out of bed and in his pajamas padded down into his basement where he keeps his computer. And he discovered that the story that Michael Isikoff had been studying and tracking for nearly a year and a half for Newsweek magazine was being spiked. What Isikoff had discovered was the sexual relationship between Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky. And what he discovered that Saturday morning on the 17th of January in 1998 was that, based upon some more information that Isikoff had provided to Newsweek, the senior editors decided to spike the story. And so on his blog, this young man put this headline: Newsweek kills story on White House intern. 23-year-old sex relationship with president. What was the man's name? Matt Drudge. Put him on the map. BBC News said this may be the first time that a story of such consequence developed on the internet. Love him or hate him, Matt Drudge's report on the Clinton scandal is the most visible sign to date of the changing nature of journalism. Drudge himself put it very well. He said, time was when only newsrooms had access to the full pictures of the day's events, but now any citizen does. We get to see the kinds of cuts that are made for all kinds of reasons, endless layers of editors with all kinds of endless agendas changing bits and pieces. So by the time the newspaper hits your welcome mat, it has no meaning. Now, with a modem, anyone can follow the world and report on the world. No middleman, no big brother. And he said, I guess this changes everything. You just might say. In 1998, one of my favorite mouthpieces for the establishment got revealed, thanks to the internet. His name is Dan Rather. For 24 years, he was the establishment mouthpiece, never varying from the line. And in 1988, 10 years prior, he had interviewed 6 Vietnam soldiers about the after effects of being in the war and how they had terrible nightmares and health problems, and some of them became psychopaths, and they told of ghastly stories of shooting civilians and just rampaging. And the whole point, of course, that Rather was trying to make is that these soldiers had turned bad, and there was the story according to the line. And there it was, and there it stayed until 2 authors decided to look into the matter. And you can go to your search engine of choice and type in stolen valor. These 2 authors wanted to validate what Rather had come up with. And so they got access to all of the background records, the military records of these 6 who Rather had interviewed. How many of them, would you guess, out of the 6 actually saw any sort of action in Vietnam? You know the answer. 1. And what was he? He was a repairman. Never carried an M1. Well, the internet, of course, had a field day with that. And then fast forward to the year 2004, and Rather is at it again. This time he's trying to besmirch George Bush's record with the Air National Guard. He picked up some background information that he didn't serve as often as what he did, and so on. It turned out that those were forgeries. And this time, CBS couldn't back them up. For 2 weeks, they denied that they were forgeries. And then they finally came, because of pressure, because of people having the original source material and being able to go, just like the Bible, back to the original. CBS finally said, well, we really can't validate it. By that time, they'd had enough of Dan Rather, and the remarkable end to his career. It's fascinating to watch what happens. It's delightful sometimes. I mean the man no harm. I mean him a lot of harm, because he's harmed us. But let's put this in perspective. And I do see what time it is. what they did was demote him, take him off television, and give him a corner office and nothing to do. And they just waited. And in June of 2005, Dan Rather quit. And what is old Dan doing these days? He has a 1-hour-a-week TV show on HD Net. Dan Rather Reports. Be sure to see it. In 2004, which was a busy year, the Kenyan government hired an investigatory firm called Kroll to discover, and what they could was find out corruption about the party that was running against the powers already in office. Called the Kroll Report. Once again, go to your search engine of choice, Kroll. Well, what happened was that the report not only discovered the corruption of the counterparties, their competitors, their opposition, but also of their own. And so this was a report that the government had no interest in exposing. They spent many thousands of dollars for it, and they just simply sat on it until somebody sent it over to a man by the name of Julian Assange. Julian said, "This works," and he published the report. And Julian, of course, later was interviewed on TED TV, and Chris Anderson, and the report, the language, the conversation is just too good for me to try to condense. Anderson said, this report, Assange said, this report became a dead albatross around the president's neck. Anderson. And word of the report leaked into Kenya, not from the official media, but indirectly via the internet. And in your opinion, it actually shifted the election? Assange. Yes, this became front page news, was then printed in all of the surrounding countries of Kenya and Tanzania and South Africa. It ran for 20 nights straight on Kenya TV and shifted the vote by 10%, which changed the result of the election. Anderson. So your leak really substantially changed the world. And Assange humbly said, yes. WikiLeaks. The year 2008 is considered by many to be the first internet presidential election. It was the first time of a money bomb, the first experience with that. Ron Paul was the recipient. In one day, he raised $4.3 million. A week later, another $4.4 million. And this was the first election where more and more people began to get their information not only from the internet, but be able to support candidates through the internet. So it is beginning to grow and thrive and prosper. 2008. Another one of those pitons. Now we shift over to something called YouTube, a natural outgrowth of this technology. Got another question for you. Roughly, how many videos are right now on YouTube? Any idea? Any? Just make a guess. 100 million? 500 million? A billion? How about 1.311 billion videos are available, with more being added every minute? Well, one of my favorites has to do with one of my least favorite organizations. You can guess that, of course, it would be the Federal Reserve, which has been flying on empty and falsehood for years. There was a little 5-minute segment when Congressman Alan Grayson and Elizabeth Cole confronted each other. She was the spokesman for the Federal Reserve, and he had just a few questions about how they were accounting for all of these off-books, huge amounts of money, trillions of dollars. You can simply type into your search engine of choice, Grayson Cole Fed, and you will be treated to 5 minutes and 26 seconds that took place on May 5th, 2009. One of my favorite interpreters of current history is Anthony Weil, W-I-L-E. He writes for the Daily Bell. And he said this. He said, it is one of the single most astonishing moments or minutes ever manifested and preserved in this already amazing digital era. During the questioning of Coleman, Grayson asks her over and over if there is a formal accounting available for the trillions in off-book balance sheet activity for the Fed. He asks patiently, and he repeats the question many times. Coleman stutters, makes statements that are obviously evasive, and then finally all but admits that she has no authority even to examine the Fed's off-balance sheet activities. She admits this in a frazzled manner, but only after losing her way so badly that she has to ask Grayson to repeat the question which he has already asked about 10 times. It was a brilliant exposure of the Fed. I just enjoy this whole business of the unraveling of this what do I want to call it? The emperor naked. What is the Fed chair now doing these days to push forward this transparency? Visiting students at George Washington University to promote the Fed line. But don't you find that just the whole fact that he's showing up to educate or miseducate? What can you imagine that? Could you imagine Greenspan doing that, or Paul Volcker, or Gee Whiz Miller, or any of the other guys? I think it's an extraordinary come down. I'm loving the unraveling. Of course, now we coming to the end, and this is going to work out just fine. We now know about SOPA and PIPA, the online piracy acts that went down in flames. You already know about that and the power of the internet. Let me give you some statistical proof of the pressure that was put on Congress just in one 24-hour period. Congress received, are you ready, 14 million emails. 7,000 websites voluntarily shut down for the day to protest. Google's online petition got 4.5 million signatures by noon. And TechDirt's calling widget, whatever that is, was receiving 2,000 phone calls per minute opposing SOPA. Now, there's a lot of cases and a lot of quotes, and I could spend the rest of the time just giving you quotes of senators and representatives heading for cover. Let me give you just one. One fellow who's been in the news lately, Senator Marco Rubio from Florida, Tea Party favorite. Now, Eric Erickson writes for another very famous and very popular web blog called redstate.com. And on the morning of this bill coming to Congress, he wrote this on his website. He said, "This morning, I noted that we should primary, that is to say, vote against, using primary as a verb, we should primary senators and representatives on the left and on the right who refuse to back away from SOPA and PIPA, Protect IP, which was in the Senate. Included in the list of sponsors, unfortunately, was Senator Marco Rubio. I would hate to primary such a great guy. We spent a lot of time, energy, effort, and money getting him elected. But SOPA and Protect IP are that bad." About an hour ago, he then writes, Senator Marco Rubio showed again why he is a real leader and a listener. He is dropping his co-sponsorship of Protect IP. And this is what Marco wrote. I'm going to give you the quote exactly and hear how it sounds when a senator says, "I have made a hell of a mistake." This is what he said. "Earlier this year, this bill passed the Senate Judiciary Committee unanimously and without controversy. Since then, we've heard legitimate concerns about the impact the bill could have on access to the internet and about a potentially unreasonable expansion of the government's power to impact the internet. Congress should listen and avoid rushing through a bill that could have many unintended consequences." That's how a senator says, "I've made a hell of a mistake." Now, he's about to make another one, and he just happens to be in the news lately, and it'll be interesting to see how the internet maybe gets his attention and turns him around on some issues of, what shall I say, international military affairs, but I don't have time to go into that, much as I'd like to. Senator Everett Dirksen put it very well. He says, when we feel the heat, we see the light. You know, if we were to encapsulize the entire internet, that would be a perfect way. For 10 years, since about the year 2000, Massachusetts Institute of Technology decided to download for free every one of their courses. All the source material, all the background, all the commentary on all of their courses for free on the internet. Now, that's another event, just all by itself. Now, we could spend time about why MIT would do something like that. But 100 million students have accessed that. for free. Well, so far so good. You know, you begin to think, wow, that's going to change education, isn't it? Well, about 3 or 4 months ago, I'm going to guess now about September, MIT announced that they are now going to complete the loop. Because just because somebody took a class and took a test, an employer isn't going to be impressed unless MIT says you gained competency. And so now, for a small fee, you can take the free course, take an exam, and for less than $100, get a piece of paper from MIT that says you did. Now, what is that doing to higher education? I mean, it boggles, doesn't it? Now, here is the spokesman for the education establishment. Kevin Carey writes for the Chronicle of Higher Education. Now, this is the mouthpiece commenting about MIT. He said, "It is simply untenable for traditional universities to claim global leadership in educating a planet of 7 billion people when you hoard your education offerings for a few thousand well-to-do students living together on a small patch of land." Now, that isn't as elegant as it could be, but we get the idea. And so what are those schools going to do with all that brick and mortar when, as the internet begins to expand and teach and grow without paying, what is it at Harvard, $62,000 a year? Oh, plus room and board? Other examples of the internet, and these are kind of fun and silly, and we're almost done, and we're rounding third and heading home. Representative Steve Chabot, he's a Republican from Ohio, last year banned cell phones from his town hall meetings. Now, Gary North referred to him as bonehead, but he made the point. That so outraged the people not only at the town hall, but all the other people they talked to on the internet. It didn't take Chabot but 30 days to change his website and his decision. You can go to his website now, to the internet, search engine of your choice, and type in Steve Chabot, Republican, Ohio, and you'll see there, in the interests of full disclosure and transparency, we invite you to bring your cell phones. We have nothing to hide. Here's another one. A young man, a law student, in year 2007, was walking by the Boston Common, and it was late in the afternoon, and he heard a woman screaming. And she was screaming, and this is right from the testimony, the court testimony, "Stop! Stop! You're hurting him! Help!" Well, he looked around and saw 2 police manhandling an alleged drug smuggler, or criminal, alleged. And so he started taking pictures on his cell phone. And for his trouble, got arrested by the police. After they put this guy in the back of the cruiser, then they went after him, charging him with, and you're going to love this, impeding officers, aiding and abetting a criminal, and being a public nuisance. Well, Simon Glick was a law student, and he had some friends at the ACLU who were itching for a fight. The ACLU took it to court. Now, it did take 5 years, but the court ruled, and this is right from the testimony from the court, "We conclude that Glick was exercising clearly established First Amendment rights in filming the officers in a public place, and his clearly established Fourth Amendment rights were violated by his arrest without probable cause." He got a letter of apology from BPD and a check for $170,000. Paid for his cell phone. Another example. On September 18th, last year, 2011, Ray Comfort produced and published a movie, 33 minutes long, designed, he said, to turn people from pro-abortion to pro-life in 33 minutes. The name of the movie is 180. Again, you can go to and type in just 180, and you can get the entire film. This is what Comfort said. "Knowledge is very, very powerful. And when we have knowledge, it can change our whole perspective. Now, here's the power of the internet. Within 24 hours, he had 30,000 hits on the movie. As of this morning, a little over 3 million have gone there and got their minds changed. Has anybody seen that? It's pretty rough. It starts off with the Holocaust and Adolf Hitler, and then comparing it to our Holocaust. Quite a remarkable movie. Back in 2005, Rupert Murdoch decided that he was going to take the internet by storm and turn it into a political tool. He had more money than good sense. He wrote a check for $580,000 to buy MySpace, which was 3 or 4 times more popular than Facebook. And he began to insert political messages into the conversation. Not only did it fail, he bailed out last June and sold it for $35 million. That is what we call cratering. Other examples, the Zimmerman case. George Zimmerman, accused of being a racist. And the NBC people are what we call chastened. You know what's happening here is the next time somebody decides to try to twist something, he must know that somebody's watching. Isn't that beautiful? We're not asking him to change his mind. We're just simply asking him to change their behavior. Fast and Furious. Oh, stars. There's a book that is being promoted by the internet called Fast and Furious, and I read it, did a book report on it. There's more in there than you want to know, but out of that book is coming a citation for contempt by the House of Representatives on Eric Holder. Now, there's a guy that needs other work. And I'd love to see him get out long before the next election, but that's another story. We talked about Bob Blaha. Is he still here? No. I asked him for a brief example of how specifically the internet is helping his campaign. And he thought for a minute. He said, well, I can give you one. He said, when we first got started and it was appearing that we would be a threat, our opposition started spreading a word that we were not Christians. He said, we got word of that. Within 24 hours, we made it go away. And we haven't heard another word about it using the internet. Of course, then there is CISPA. And this simply reminds us that the Tea Party people, some of them, maybe many of them, talk a great story. But when push comes to shove, and the backroom deals are done, they go along. I think the other message there is that PIPA and SOPA, those victories, people say, well, we got that bug taken care of. Now we don't have to worry about it. Except there's another one over there. And so eternal vigilance is always and forever.
The SOPA and PIPA were really opposed by Google and Microsoft and the really big boys who never stepped up for the system. So.
Here are the lessons, and then we're done. Thomas Jefferson put it very well. He said, I know of no safe depository of the ultimate powers of society but the people themselves. And if we think them not enlightened enough to exercise their control with wholesome discretion, the remedy is not to take it from them, but to inform their discretion by education. This is the true corrective of abuses of constitutional power. And I will leave you then with a long quote from Anthony Weil. He has studied the impact of the internet on history, current affairs, political events for years. He said, there is a new reformation taking place throughout the world, led by electronic communication technology. It is not being commented on by the nightly news, nor written about in the mainstream media. But if you understand the trends and look closely, you can see it playing out every day in every part of human culture. It is already convulsing the world. Out of these labor pains, a new and freer society is being born. A new enlightenment is taking place, a fundamental reforming of society's knowledge base. It is far more important and fundamental than a technology revolution. It is rewriting the relationship that human beings have with their knowledge base and with its impact on their lives. The centralizing architecture erected by the Anglo-American elites is even now being undermined. The darkness is lifting as it lifted long ago during the Renaissance. An internet reformation is coming. In fact, its dawn is already here. And I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bob. Outstanding. We'll have time for a few questions. First of all, I just want to not thank you for busting my bubble about Marco Rubio, because that had been one of my heroes. I guess there's no one left but Ron Paul. Charlie, do you have any update from the Campaign for Liberty for us? Anything going on that we should know about?
We do have some alternates that are elected from the 5th Congressional. Myself, going to the Republican National Convention in Joburg. So, and now we're trying to raise money for us to go to to Tampa in August 27th to 30th. And that's pretty much it. There's really nothing else going on with the campaign. So.
Okay. All right, very good. We have time for a couple questions. Bob,
I brought a couple of these. For more information or just have it in hard copy, you're welcome to them. I've got several in the back. They're free for the taking.
Light from the right. Would you step up to the microphone so that it can go to the internet if you have a question, please?
Okay.
Yes, sir.
You can speak up, that'll catch if you talk loud.
Okay.
If he shouts at it from there,
Let's go.
come on, step to the mic.
All right. You seem to have a positive view of the internet and of technology in general, but I think that, and also Hayek, that technology can be used as a negative force as well. So the same like Gutenberg that produced the Declaration of Independence, as you outlined, also produced Mein Kampf and Audacity of Hope and other books like that. And so what specific thing gives you the idea that the internet is going to be a positive force in the future and not a negative?
That's a very good question. Let me give you my overview of the world, just because I come at this question with a presumption. To me, the glass is always half full. I guess I'm old enough, 72 and working on 73, that it pays to have a positive outlook and an optimistic frame of mind. So I come to you with that as an overview. It also means life is better. It also means that I have to be very, very careful about the information I put inside my head. And so to answer your question, I'm going to look in my brain and say, do I have a specific example of something that the internet has driven that is positive? And there was an example when Ron Paul showed up at, what was the name of the university, sweetie? University of Phoenix, or no, probably it was out in California, I think.
UCLA.
UCLA, perhaps? Berkeley, maybe?
Berkeley.
It was Berkeley.
It was Berkeley. Who knew?
And Ron Paul showed up, and the stadium that he was speaking at had a capacity of 6,000 or 7,000. The people lined up to get in was almost a mile long, a half an hour before Ron Paul ever showed on the scene. It's all on video. In fact, the line is the speed up. The camera is sped up because otherwise you get bored watching all these people go by. And so it looks like they're running in, which is exciting as well. Now, did the media push that? Where did they get that information? Let's assume that they know what we know, that the media can't be trusted. How did these young people, first of all, know he was coming, and why did they want to go? What was he going to say that they wanted to hear? Where did they get that information? Now, if they didn't get it from the national media and the MSM and the downstream media or whatever you want to call it, my take is that they must have gotten it from somewhere, and they must have reacted positively. And so that is a tiny little sliver of how I keep from getting discouraged, that the young people are fed up, they're aware, and they know what's going on. And so the internet has facilitated that. That would be my answer.
But can I can I follow up by saying that my question isn't so much that has the internet done positive things or has the internet done negative things, as it is that what makes it an overall positive force for the future and not a negative? Because we've seen issues where technology, the rifle can be used as a positive force, say in the American Revolution, or a negative force, say in Mao's Glorious Revolution. And I think that you have to point to a specific process or reason why technology overall will be a beneficial thing to humankind.
Well, I think you're asking a question that I don't know how to answer, and that is that more information is in general better.
Sunshine's the best disinfectant.
I guess that would be my take on it. More information is better. It's not going to be perfect. Yeah, I think Mark Twain said it very well. He said it's created heaven and it's created hell. But it has created 1,000 heavens to every hell. That's paraphrasing. He's smarter than I am. I'll go with that.
Okay. All right. Anything on the internet?
Actually, well, I kind of wanted to follow up myself. There's kind of a battle going on, as you mentioned. It was UCLA that had 10,000 people speaking, or that Ron Paul addressed. Berkeley was aiming 300, I believe.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But that's the point is that none of this is in the media, and a lot of people are not getting it. Now, there's a lot of people that are active on the internet, and we know what's going on, but it's a battle between those that are connected and those that aren't. I guess those that are literate and those that are illiterate.
Is it light versus darkness? Would you want to make it that broad?
It's more of an educational thing. I mean, like my grandmother, she's never going to make it up on the internet. She's 95. You know?
But is she going to vote?
She will always vote.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But it's a battle. So where do you foresee it going? I mean, because the mainstream media wants to keep the meme that Ron Paul is unelectable going. If you look at the internet, it's anything but.
Well, we'll wait till Tampa. But remember, my view, again, I'm not looking at the next election. First of all, I'm singularly unimpressed with the presidential race. I don't think it makes a tinker's damn. Who gets in? If Obama gets in, the advantage is we know he's a communist. He's a thug. He's right out of Chicago. We know that. That's a good thing to know. Romney, not so much. He may be an Obama in a white skin. We won't know that until 2 years into his... But I don't care. Now, what I do care greatly about is the 5th Congressional District. And the next time we have an opportunity to get rid of Mr. Mark and Mr. Mike up in Denver in the Senate, next time we get rid of those guys. I think the real battle is in the Senate. I've seen some numbers, and I'm not a political analyst on this thing, but there are more Republicans or more Democrats up for re-election run against good, strong Republicans than there are the other way around. The Senate could, in fact, go, pardon me, Republican, slightly more conservative than they are now. I take great encouragement by that. What I do is look at the election for 2016. Let's focus on that and see what can happen in the next 4 years. What has happened in the last 4? Ron Paul came from who to, oh my God, he might be real. In the next 4 years, is that curve going up or is it going down? I think 2016, I can hardly get it. That's just, but that's my positive, looking for something to hang my hat on. Rich.
Actually, Chuck's over here
I'm
with
sorry.
the
Hi, Chuck.
microphone. Guys, line up by the mic just to make it easy.
Kind of a follow-up on that. Do you think that the Republican Party will adopt and accept the technological revolution represented by the internet before it self-destructs, as it seems to be doing at present?
That's just pure speculation, Chuck. I don't know. Better question is it worth saving? I don't know. There are people who say we can take what's left. Jeff Wright will take that position. You mentioned his name earlier. By the way, I want to give you a little kind of an aside on that. Jeff is writing a book, and it's called Restoration. And I've been privileged to do the editing on it.
He's also watching.
Oh, he is. Hi, Jeff. I'm working, babe. He's now done with his part, and he's waiting for me. You know, it's like chipping your way through an iceberg with a ice pick. And it takes me a long time to do that. And I'm on chapter 17. He's written 22 chapters. But he has the view that maybe, possibly, at least on the county level, we can redeem, restore, resurrect the GOP. Well, fine. He knows more about that stuff than I do. Yeah. He's certainly gotten his knickers dented. trying to do that. We'll see. Beyond that, it's pure speculation based on ignorance.
Well, I've changed my question I was going to ask, but because of what you just said. And really the issue, or the question I have, is the Whig Party preceded the Republican Party. We're not a three-party country. I don't think we ever will be. The tradition is so far against it. I think if the Republican Party continues to be a rubber stamp or a very faded copy of the left, they are going to continue to be irrelevant, as the Whig Party did, and there'll be an opening there for some other serious alternative to the left.
You have a question?
I guess my question is, do you agree with that?
Sure.
Okay, that's it. That's simple.
All right, that's good. Any more?
Can I make a statement? This is in reference to your talk tonight. In El Paso County, back in December, we passed a resolution that said that the Sheriff's Department would uphold habeas corpus against the NDAA. And within 8 weeks, 5 national organizations had heard of it, and they were going to take it viral, and they were going to take it nationally. Now, what happened last week in Virginia is that resolution was passed on state level, and the governor vetoed it. But then after people, well, now listen, this is the wonderful thing. After people wrote in and said, no, you can't veto this, the governor looked at it again, and he actually passed it. So in the state of Virginia, the NDAA is not valid, as according to paragraphs 1021 and 1022.
Now, you want to put that in the form of a question.
Okay, so what do you think about that?
No. I want to give you the question that I want asked so I can give you the answer because it's so important. Who was the driving force behind that statement here in town? What was her name? Her name.
I'm supposed to ask that.
Her name is Peggy Littleton. What an extraordinary individual. Somebody you should get to know.
And also Kim Green, she helped out.
Good. Great. I appreciate your time. I see that it is time, and I am grateful to you for your attention. Hope you enjoyed this as much as I did.
Okay, let's thank Bob one more time. Help yourself to some drinks and snacks. Please throw some money in the kitty out there. Okay, and there's another box next to it for Trace to keep our technology going. If you want to contribute to that, do that as well. Take any of our books or literature. We'll see you in June. Okay.